Minister, the National Disability Insurance Agency recently confirmed that 22,000 children with autism between the ages of 7 and 14 are being retested to see if they can continue receiving support under the NDIS. That means thousands of Victorian children are at risk of completely losing their support. This will obviously have very real ramifications for participants in the scheme who are promised that no one would be worse off. I note within this context that the final report from the Family and Community Development Committee for the Inquiry into Services for People with Autism Spectrum Disorder, tabled last year, recognised the vulnerability of people with autism in not meeting the eligibility criteria for the NDIS, and noted that many will therefore require services and support to enable them to live fulfilling lives from the state. Minister, what will this government do to ensure that Victorians with autism who lose out by not meeting this new criteria will continue to get the services and support they need and deserve?
Minister, Ms Karkus.
Thank you, and I thank the member for her question. I know that these issues are very dear to her heart. As someone who also has children with autism on the ASD spectrum in my own family, I too share my dismay at the approach that the federal government has taken in relation to these issues. I am appalled that children with autism are having their eligibility for the NDIS question now, and I can advise the member that the uncertainty that this causes to families in crisis by the NDIA and the Commonwealth is in fact truly cruel. It's not the first time that the Turnbull government has been prepared to cause uncertainty for people with disabilities in this country. We know that, of course, the member knows full well the Victorian government is a joint funder of the NDIS, and we've been making a very significant contribution to funding this scheme. We've made a very significant contribution. We have a significant stake in making sure that we hold the Commonwealth to account in delivering what was promised. It is true that the numbers of NDIS participants with autism is higher than the Productivity Commission expected. In bilateral agreements between the Commonwealth and the states and territories, children who were already receiving support through defined programs for children with autism were automatically transferred into the NDIS without the burden of further testing. So the NDIA and the Commonwealth are now threatening to backtest thousands of children with autism to make sure they meet the eligibility criteria and are reviewing them out when they don't. So this is the exact opposite of what children with autism need. We have, in my own portfolio, I'm proud of the fact that we have provided more funding for early childhood intervention services to ensure that children with autism and other disabilities and special needs can continue to access the support that they need in those critical formative years to effectively make up the shortfalls and the shortcomings of the NDIA as they have taken too long to bring children, to assess children, to get the plan that they need, to get the supports that they need. Our government and my department have stepped in to provide that additional support, even though the bilateral agreement did not require us to do that, and we have provided continued investment in successive budgets for that. The Andrews Labor government, instead of abandoning families struggling to cope with the challenges autism presents in their children's lives, is intent on supporting them. We are developing a state autism plan to drive the government's support for people with autism across a range of life stages, from diagnosis, early intervention, education, health services and community access. So that whether a Victorian is receiving the NDIS or not, we are focused on making life easier for people with autism, whilst the Turnbull government is clearly making it harder. And I know that Minister Foley has continued to advocate to the Commonwealth around this issue and a range of other issues that go to the shortcomings of what is being delivered through the NDIS to all people with disabilities in this country. It is disappointing that they are really looking at making savings in relation to these issues rather than giving people with disabilities the support that they deserve. Yeah.